Mr. Chairman, worthy opponents, I'm here today to rebut the speech made by Ms. Sam Reed, who argued for the affirmative team. The first argument she made was that Ebola has a 90% death rate, yet the Center for Disease Control and Prevention statistics state otherwise. According to their stats, as of October 29, only 37% of all reported Ebola cases have resulted in death. In fact, even in Guinea, the country where Ebola has been the most deadly, the disease has a survival rate of 40%, which is 4 times higher than the 10% survival rate mentioned by Ms. Reed. And in fact, in the United States, there have only been 4 recorded cases of Ebola, and 3 of those infected patients survived. The affirmative side also argued that travel bans were effective, referencing the 1987 HIV ban. Yet it was ineffective in preventing the spread of HIV in the United States. You see, in 1987, there were 50,000 cases of HIV in the US. Yet in 2009, when the ban was lifted, there were over 1 million cases. In fact, in each of the years, 2008, while the ban was still in place, 2009, the year the ban was lifted, and 2010, after the ban had been lifted for a year, there were the same number of new HIV cases in the US each year, 48,000 new cases in each of those 3 years, which shows that there was no correlation between the removal of the travel ban and an increase in HIV cases. Furthermore, the method of restricting travel suggested by Ms. Reed would be costly and impractical, nor is it a true travel ban. Firstly, of the 358 commercial nonstop flights from Africa to other countries, none are from Guinea, Sierra Leone, or Liberia to the US. Next, according to an oncologist from Columbia University, the suggested PCR tests cost up to $200, take up to 6 hours, and are not 100% accurate. Ms. Reed's method of testing travelers for Ebola would only restrict those who tested positive from entering the country. Yet a travel ban and visa restrictions would restrict all travelers from West African countries, even to passengers who tested negative for Ebola. And these restrictions are unnecessary. Thank you.
Thank you, and we would like to continue the first affirmative rebuttal.
Honorable opponents, esteemed judges, and Mr. Chairman, Mr. Gordon has emphasized that the United States does have proper sanitary conditions, treatments, and preparations for Ebola, when in fact it does not. Mr. Gordon has stated, quote, "We have proper plumbing and we have proper quarantine zones for those who are infected," unquote. Yet the Association for Professionals in Infection Control conducted a survey that said only 6% of hospitals said they felt adequately prepared to treat an Ebola patient. And over 51% of hospitals said that they had only 1 full-time infection preventionist. That sounds to me like the United States is not prepared with proper conditions to treat the infectious disease. Secondly, Mr. Gordon stated, quote, "Ebola isn't the Black Plague, and it has not killed 1/3 of the population," unquote. Well, it may not be the Black Plague, but in one situation, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention told NBC News that by January of 2015, 1.4 million people will be infected. In addition, the World Health Organization also predicted that the Ebola outbreak could grow to 10,000 cases weekly in the next 2 months. Any death of a United States citizen is significant, and so this disease must be prevented from further spreading. Thirdly, my honorable opponent, Mr. Gordon, has said, quote, "You cannot see symptoms from patients that can be boarding the plane if they have been recently infected," unquote. Well, as previously stated by the first informative constructive speaker, the polymer chain reaction test can detect any sign of Ebola before the symptoms occur. Therefore, it is greatly effective to understand what travelers are infected with the disease before they board a plane. Lastly, Mr. Gordon has stated, quote, "Treating Ebola is rather simple. If treating Ebola is rather simple, then why have 4,960 out of the 7,728 people infected died from the disease? No, if treating Ebola is rather simple, then why has there never been a vaccine, cure, or treatment of the disease since the last outbreak in Uganda in 1976? I'll tell you why. is an infectious disease with 4 different mutations, making it extremely difficult to even find a vaccination for the disease. Without a cure, people will continue to die. And without a travel ban, people will continue to be infected. Stop people from dying and implement a travel ban and visa restrictions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam Reed. Now we'd like to call the second negative rebuttal speaker.
Mr. Chairman, honorable judges, worthy opponents, I am here to rebut the points made by the Honorable Mr. Benjamin Cadman in his affirmative speech. Ben made the point that we cannot stand by while thousands of people innocently die, and I agree with him. This is very much true. And the best moves to stop the virus are proactive. But Michael C. Osterholm of the Washington Post stated that the G7 nations must immediately mobilize and deploy hundreds of infectious disease experts along with medical and technical assets to map the epidemic. Previous travel bans limit our effectiveness in being able to do this. Previous outbreaks were fought at the source by quarantining the infected, and this is the strategy we must take to stop it this time. Benjamin Cadman also stated that the CDC lacks the precautions necessary to stop the spread of Ebola. The CDC has successfully educated the general public and conducted important science regarding the outbreaks. The CDC has been effective so far at stopping the Ebola virus in the United States. There have only been 3 confirmed cases of Ebola in the United States, and there's only been 1 death caused by Ebola in the United States. He also made the point of the man on the plane who coughed, and it took hours for the CDC, he claimed, to respond. It is not the CDC's responsibility to respond to these sorts of cases. It is up to the local emergency services. Furthermore, in these hours, the other people on the plane were not at risk of being infected, as this man did not yet show symptoms of Ebola and didn't end up having Ebola in the first place. Benjamin Cadman made the point that all people leaving and entering Western African nations should be tested for Ebola. He argued that PCR tests make sense on a large scale to do for everyone who wants to travel. These tests require $100, a full vial of blood, and a team of medical professionals, and up to a week to perform. This is ineffective in a large scale, and even if we do these tests, it would make traveling to and from West Africa much more difficult, so we cannot get the aid there that they require. There are already methods in place which test passengers to and from West Africa, and they are checked for symptoms which include fever, and if these symptoms have not developed yet, they are safe to travel because they cannot spread Ebola. Thank you.
Thank you, and we'd like to call the next honorable affirmative speaker.
Honorable judges, worthy opponents, and Mr. Chairman, my respectable opponent, Ms. Harriet Holmes, spoke last week of the medical repercussions of a travel ban on Ebola. However, there will be no medical repercussions if a travel ban is installed. She stated that a travel ban will not stop the Ebola virus from spreading. However, it will. As we heard last week from my fellow affirmative speakers, a travel ban and visa restrictions will hold the epidemic in West Africa rather than bringing it here. It is important to keep the infected people at the source and not to risk the virus crossing our borders into America more than it already has. Ms. Holmes also stated that even with a travel ban, people who want proper health care from the United States will find a way to get here and we will not know where they are. Here in the United States, we have security covering all borders that is strong enough not to let immigrants in, especially ones coming from West Africa. Our immigration security is known to be of the strongest in the world, so it is unlikely that West Africans would be able to come to the United States by means other than authorized plane. Even if immigrants with Ebola were able to cross our borders, they would not be supplied with the health care they needed. The American Immigration Council states that they will not supply health care to unauthorized immigrants, therefore no one coming from West Africa would be allowed any of our health care anyways. So, with immigrants roaming the United States infected with Ebola and without treatment, it is far more likely that the epidemic would become a sudden threat spreading across the country. Ms. Holmes' other main point in her speech was the United States supplies, medicines, and professionals must aid West Africa to stop the epidemic at the source. The resolve of this debate is that there should be a travel ban for people coming here from West Africa. The resolve says nothing about travel bans going to West Africa. Ms. Holmes also stated that if we go to the source, our reputation would show a strategic decision to attack the source with our health care, and if we do not do that, our reputation as a nation will go down in history with fear and self-interest. This may be true, but our debate today is not about travels to West Africa. It is about traveling from West Africa to the United States, which could make matters much worse. This argument in Ms. Holmes' speech is not useful to this debate because it does not stay on topic with our resolve. Thank you.